שלום מרומה ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל במהרה אמן. New phone, right?
What?
New phone.
Speak better.
Sorry, the phone can't do that.
There's toast. The homage at the outset introduces us to the idea that I want to speak about at greater length in the Parsha Shiur on Friday morning, but just an allusion to it here, the idea of Itzivonu, that the Ribono Shel Olam begins the relationship with human beings with a discipline, with instructions, with commandments. He doesn't leave humankind alone to its own devices, so to speak. So Adam Rishon finds himself in Gan Eden under the most perfect physical circumstances imaginable. And he has an instruction from the Ribono Shel Olam Kaviyachol. Mikol Eitz Hagan Ochol Tofel, from all of the trees that exist here in this wondrous garden, you can eat whatever you want. But Me'etz Hadas Tov Hara, there's one tree here that's called the Eitz Hadas. It's hard to define that. It's usually defined in terms of knowledge. But I think a more exact interpretation would be in terms of choice. Das is, Chazal say, you mean das avdola minayin. Without das, there cannot be any choices. There cannot be any separations. So the Eitz Hadas is the medium by which Adam Rishon and all of his descendants, all human beings, have the ability to choose. And the Lord warns them, don't eat from it. I will not prevent you from eating from it. But in the long run, it will be your undoing. Because the nature of human beings is never to make wise choices. Our nature is, we don't see the future, we don't understand the consequences of behavior, we act emotionally and irrationally. So how can we say that we make a wise choice? And many times in life, that's what we call luck or good fortune. I don't know why it turned out well. I did everything wrong and it turned out fine. And sometimes I do everything right and it turns out to be a disaster. So that was a choice that God gave. And the story with the Nochash and with Chava, so they come to eat from the Eitz Hadas. Now in the Torah it says Vayeda ha'odom v'ishto ki arumi meim. Adam and Chava were now aware that they were without clothes, that they were naked. Because when they ate from the Hadas, so then the Yetzer Hara entered into them, which is part of the choice. You can't have a choice without a Yetzer Hara. So because of that, they realized that they're Erumim. So Rashi, in his Parish, Rashi Rambreshis is always noteworthy, but here it's absolutely brilliant. So Rashi says, Rumim Haim. What does it mean they were naked? So Rashi says a Rumi means they were naked because they didn't have any mitzvahs. Mitzvah achas hoisalahem. They had one mitzvah. Rashi means the mitzvah of not eating from the Eitz Hadas. And they violated that mitzvah. The mitzvah disappeared. So now they're stripped naked. They have no mitzvahs. God has left them, so to speak, without instructions. And that's what it means, naked. Naked means you're left to your own devices. We said it for 40 days here more, for 50 days in the David Ori. I had no one to instruct me, David HaMelech says. But Vashem Yasveni. The Rebbeinu Shalom at least told me what to do. To be in a state of being where there are no instructions whatsoever, that is spiritual death. So the Meshech Chochmah, Meir Simcha, in his great Parish, the Chumash, raises here a fundamental question. Why does Rashi say mitzvah achas hoisalahem? They had one mitzvah. They had another mitzvah, pru'urvu. That mitzvah remained. So they weren't naked from mitzvahs. They still had a mitzvah. So then why did Rashi say ki erumim heim? They're stripped of every mitzvah. So he says here a brilliant insight. He says once they ate from the Eitz Hadas, and once the Yetzer Hara entered within them, pru'urvu was no longer a mitzvah. Was a desire, was an instinct. But it was no longer seen as a mitzvah. And therefore, that's why it says that they didn't have any mitzvahs. Because now pru'urvu became a physical act, an act of emotion, but no longer purely an act of a mitzvah. And that description, therefore, of the evolution of how things become what they are is really the basis for understanding of mitzvahs. Chazal complained about mitzvahs anoshim mulumedes, mitzvahs that are habitual. People do mitzvahs without even thinking. It becomes something natural. So the essence of the mitzvah is lost. Because the mitzvah is, I'm doing it Asher kitshonu b'mitzvah so v'tzivonu. Because I was commanded to do it. But if I do things automatically, without forethought, that's what Chazal always meant when they spoke about kavona and discussed the question whether mitzvahs tzrichas kavona or mitzvahs einon tzrichas kavona. So for the bare performance of a mitzvah, you don't need kavona. A Jew walks into the sukkah, he waits in the sukkah, mekayim the mitzvah of sukkahs. But is he really mekayim the mitzvah of sukkahs if he doesn't have any awareness of the mitzvah? He doesn't have any intent to perform the mitzvah. And the Chazal debated that question. And even according to the one that held that mitzvahs einon tzrichas kavona, mitzvahs don't need intent, nevertheless, there's no question that even he held that they do need intent. And because of that, in Kabbalistic circles and in the Chassidic world and other places as well, they made prayers that you said before you did the mitzvah. L'shem yichud, Shmei, whatever those prayers are. It's not for the sake of the prayer, it's for the sake to make us realize that what we are about to perform, we're performing because v'tzivonu, because v'tzivu Hashem, and not because of the fact that it's socially acceptable or it's nice or why not. Those human failures don't add up to our credit. So that's the idea that the Meshech Chochmah says here, that Pru'ervu became something else. No longer was a mitzvah by itself. Because of that, therefore, that's why it says, Vayedu ke'erumi me'im. They knew that somehow they were stripped of something. And that loss of the holiness of the mitzvah is something that has haunted mankind until today. And we see it played out over and over again in our society and amongst our leaders, always in the news. The fact that it's stripped of its holiness, so then it becomes something that is many times negative and counterproductive. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Ratzah Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Yisrael V'Ficha Chir B'Lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenem Adonai Chakei Tzman Tzidko Yadil Torah.